So we have just received a new batch of Incarnons, the Sybaris, Vandal, Sicarus, Cestra, and Okina, and they are actually pretty decent. Instead of doing one video for each of them, I just decided to do all of them summarized in one video for you. I will go over the builds, evolutions, and my thoughts on them, and I want to make a quick disclaimer: all the builds that are showcased here are steel part builds, and if you don't have the primed mods, just use the normal ones, and then you can just use these as templates to build around different elements you want to build for. You don't need to follow them exactly. Alright, let's not waste any time. First on the list is the Sybaris, and honestly, it's one of my favorite new ones. The Sybaris by itself is just a burst rifle, but in the Incarnon form, you shoot out a 4-round burst that has a 100% chance to proc blast. This is also affected by multi-shot, so you can easily get over 2 multi-shot with galvanized chamber. This effectively means on average per 1 to 2 shots, you will reach max blast stacks in an instant and do an insane amount of damage. Especially when you build into blast damage with this weapon, I would go as far as to say that this is the most amount of raw blast damage I've seen yet in terms of modding weapons for blast. I did go for the Sybaris Prime for the Incarnon form. You can also go for the Dex version, which has more crit but less status chance, so it's up to you. I think the Prime is a nice balance. The evolutions that I went for were Blazing Barrel, as this gives us 50% multi-shot when it stacks up, and you can also go Well Rehearsed if you want that flat damage. For Evolution 3, I went for minus recoil because the recoil on this gun is jarring, honestly. And Evolution 4, I went for Survivor's Edge to get a balance of crit and status chance, and you can also go Reaver's Rapture for more base damage if you'd like. When it comes to building the Sybaris, I would suggest going straight for stacking up that blast damage, as it scales incredibly well, as this weapon literally does millions of damage against nearby enemies even with full armor. The builds in this video are going to be for Steel Path players, as I mentioned earlier, as you can only have access to Incarnon weapons in Steel Path, so just keep that in mind. We mod for Galvanized Chamber for multi-shot, a Bane of Choice, Vital Sense, Critical Delay, Speed Trigger, Galvanized Aptitude, Rifle Elementalist, and then Hellfire for heat. We then go for Primary Deadhead as well, and the reason for heat is to temporarily lower the target's armor, dealing more damage to the main target, helping us deal more damage when we reach max stacks to nearby enemies. The Bane and Elementalist work really well with scaling blast damage, and I've tried other elements with this, and honestly this one just felt the best for me. However, you can mod for Magnetic if you want to deal with Corpus enemies as well. Or you can just go flat Toxin, that works really well too. For Steel Path, this thing shreds everything. I love blast weapons, and I really love the Sybaris. It's perfect. I think blast is extremely satisfying after the rework, and it's really fun if you want to just kill a bunch of enemies that are grouped up together, especially when you pair it with a pool mechanic, whether that's using Nautilus or a pool subsume, something like that. It's really nice to just group the enemies together, just watch them get deleted. It's very fun. I would highly recommend farming the Sybaris if you haven't chosen it, or if you have chosen it, it's a good choice. Remember, you can farm all of these Incarnons through Deviri, or you can buy them from Caballero for Platinum. Before I go into this weapon, it has been confirmed by DE that this weapon is currently bugged and is pushing out ridiculous numbers without even being modded. However, by the time this video is out, or maybe shortly after, they would have most likely patched it, or they won't. I don't know. And I will be honest, I don't know how they will balance it. I don't know if it's going to be nerfed to the ground, or if it's going to be slightly tweaked. I'm not sure. But I'm going to treat this weapon as if it was performing how it should, so it should still do decent damage after the nerf or balance, whatever you want to call it. The Sicarus Incarnon is like a budget dual tox in a sense. It's a burst fire pistol that makes your bullets ricochet. It's not a bad weapon, to be honest, and any weapon that ricochets is really good, and I think it ricochets to there's no set targets, a bunch of targets, but it's really nice for clearing groups of enemies. The evolutions I went for were King's Gambit. This is a personal opinion, but this evolution is really nice if you're going for those headshots. However, if you want more consistency, you can go Feigned Retreat. The next evolution is Void Guidance, because again, the recoil on this weapon gives me a headache. So yes, I sacrifice reload speed, but I'd rather have a brain after using this weapon. For the last one, I went for the Crit Increase. I think that's the best for this one, or you can go Wise Man's Regard. When it comes to building the Sicarus, I went for a Corrosive Heat Cascadia Flare build, Galvanized Diffusion, Galvanized Shot, Lethal Torrent, Target Cracker, Pistol Gambit, Jolt, Pistol Pestilence, and Heated Charge, as well as Cascadia Flare. This is a pretty balanced setup that can be used in pretty much every mission. Otherwise, considering its huge amount of damage, you can even go Viral Heat, as this weapon can do more than enough heat proc damage per the base damage. It's broken. But this weapon is more focused on crit damage, so I would personally build for more raw damage and crit. Let's just hope DE doesn't nerf it to the ground. It should be a pretty balanced weapon afterwards. Otherwise, the damage is disgusting at the moment. It's a no-brainer, very, very strong. Before we go further, if you could smash that like button, it really helps me out. Thank you so much, my lovely tenno. We then move on to the Cestra. I initially didn't like the Cestra. However, this weapon with punch through, it's actually pretty good. The Cestra Incarnon is literally just red crit central. The Incarnate form allows you to gain critical chance with uninterrupted shots, meaning when you start shooting, you better hold that thing down until the mag is empty, basically taking mag dump to a whole new level in order to gain those red crits. So yeah, the satisfying part about this weapon is the red crits, but I don't like that it limits you to holding it down the whole time. However, with that being said, if you do mod this weapon correctly, you can honestly get easy orange to red crits with this thing without relying on the Incarnon form. But the Cestra does need punch through, in my opinion. It's pretty important. The evolutions that I went for were Steadfast Grit, or you can go Fortress Salvo if your frame has 450 armor, Rapid Reinforcement for the reload speed, and then Wise Man's Regard, or you can go the other two. You could choose as they both have huge crit increases. In terms of building this weapon, we go Galvanized Diffusion, Galvanized Shot, Lethal Torrent, a Bane of Choice, Pistol Gambit, and Target Cracker. And Heated Charge for heat as we use Cascadia Flare in the Arcane slot. This weapon's damage scales so well with Galvanized Shot and its base damage in general, it's really, really good. And it surprised me, I did judge this weapon before I modded it, but yeah, it's not that bad. Definitely worth getting it and farming for it if you mod it correctly. Up next, we have the Vandal. The Vandal Incarnon is not the best, but it's not the worst at the same time. I really enjoy it because it reminds me of a blaster from Star Wars in the weirdest way, and this is a very good corpus-based weapon because the Incarnon form turns it into a high-power beam that does magnetic damage. But it's not like the turret or anything where you have a consistent beam, it's just like a projectile, basically. I think it's satisfying and it does considerable damage, to be fair, and the evolutions I went for was Paragon Essence, Extended Volley, and Death Trap Trigger for flat crit. I did go for the Dera Vandal for the Incarnate form, and in terms of building the Vandal, it has Ined Magnetic in the Incarnate form, so you can just build around it and mod for something else. I did try a Corrosive Heat combo, so I can basically run it with any faction, and it does work quite well, to be fair. Galvanized Chamber, a Bane of Choice, Vital Sense, Vile Acceleration, High Voltage, Malignant Force, Galvanized Aptitude, and Hellfire. This weapon does have quite a bit of punch through, so you could just go flat fire rate if you want, and then I went for Primary Deadhead. This is the final build here. You can also go for Viral Hunting Munitions as it works pretty well with this weapon. The only thing is the magnetic is not forced in the Incarnon form, so if you mod for another element, you are going to affect the status chant weightings, effectively not applying as much magnetic as you may want. Just keep this in mind with whatever faction you decide to use and build this weapon for. Overall, it's a very fun Incarnon. I really like it, but may not be the best for pure damage and group clearing. Moving on to the last weapon on this list, the Okina. I don't know if I said that correctly. I'm so bad with pronouncing names. These melees are amazing in the Incarnate form and honestly shred everything and surprised me so much. When you turn it into the Incarnate form, kills will generate spectral daggers that target nearby enemies applying cold at max stacks, meaning they will be frozen, of course. And you gain 100% melee damage, 20% sprint speed, 20% parkour velocity. This paired with melee influence is actually disgusting, and I will explain why in a moment. The evolutions I went for are Synergist Surety, and you can also go Seeing Red for the combo sustain as well. The next one is Orokin Reach, and lastly I went for Survivor's Edge to increase a bit of crit as well as a big status chance increase. When it comes to building the Okinas, I went for Spinning Needle as the stance, Condition Overload, Fury, a Bane, Organ Shatter, Galvanized Reflex, Weeping Wounds, Galvanized Steel, and Shocking Touch. This is so that we can run melee influence, and for the Tenno mod I went for Dreamer's Wrath. You can also swap out Weeping Wounds to actually go Galvanized Elementalist to make use of the triple Galvanized setup. However, I personally prefer Weeping Wounds as it scales a lot more with combo counter, so this allows us to proc our melee influence a lot more. The sheer amount of damage you get with the setup and melee influence is absolutely crazy. It feels a lot stronger than most influence setups, and it is most likely because if you Tenno or heavy attack the enemies that are frozen, and it procs melee influence. The increased crit damage against the frozen enemies will of course boost the melee influence spreads significantly. Not to mention the fact that your second evolution increases your status damage as well, which is even more powerful. So try your best to attack those frozen enemies as the daggers target nearby enemies. These Okinas surprised me so much. Like I said, I was pleasantly surprised and I really enjoy them. I am super excited to try these melees out with certain synergies and frames, and I can tell you with Saren it's going to be even more disgusting. And of course, pairing this with Frost is going to be amazing with his augment. And that pretty much concludes all the new Incarnon weapons. They are actually really good Incarnons and a lot of fun. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite Incarnon is for this new batch. I love the Sybaris and the Okinas the most. They are definitely the best in my opinion. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you are interested in becoming a Nova main, because after her rework she definitely will be, I just did a Nova video if you want to go and check it out. As always, a massive shout out to all of the amazing channel members, and a special thank you to Darwin, Fish, Joshua, Villa, Caden, Trum, Shakiro, Gilbert, Ayrton Yard, and Tythrax. Thank you all so much for your ongoing support. I really appreciate it. Okay, enjoy the new Incarnons. Bye!